Welcome back to another episode of the Collaborative IEP podcast. I'm Ashley Barlow, your host, and I am so happy you are here. Oh, friends, we're going to talk about something that's like been kind of burning on my mind recently. We're going to talk about belonging here in a second. It's just like really, really circulating up here. Um, and but holy cow, you are so happy that this is not smell-o-vision. Our dog, Coco, who weighs over 90 pounds, like close to 100 pounds, is a black lab, which have this like deliciously oily and thick coat that is full of like multiple kinds of fur, but she is the hairiest thing alive. Like if she touches you, you feel gross. If she brushes up a chair, you're going to have to use something to get the hair off of it. If she touches your bed, you have to launder the entire thing. That kind of hairy beast. Um, she got sprayed by a skunk last night. It has been less than 24 hours, and I sit here with a cinnamon apple candle burning. I don't even like that scent. I don't know why I had it, but it was in my candle cabinet. Vinegar, a pot of vinegar, a pot of charcoal, and essential oils going, and next door in the kitchen, I've got like a simmer pot going with lemons and cinnamon and whatnot. And I just went to J. Crew as I do, especially when things are not going well. And I said to the lady, "You were so helpful. Thank you for your help. And one last question. How bad do I smell?" And she was like, "You smell." So be happy that it is not smell-o-vision. Oh my gosh, major crisis. And to top it all off, I am headed, this is one of my last tasks before I head to Parents Weekend to visit Griffin, which is super exciting, but to meet a bunch of new people. And I think this like smelly skunk oil is everywhere. Like I'm pretty sure that I smell like skunk everywhere. So say a prayer for the patron saint of essential oils because I figure it's better to smell like a spa than it is to smell like a skunk. We shall see. Okay, so belonging. I started a little thing on my phone not too long ago, mm, where and I'm pulling it up right. So I started a little thing because I was really thinking a lot about belonging. I think about it a lot. Whenever I talk to Heather Avis over at the Lucky Few, I feel like we talk about belonging a lot because we talk about inclusion a lot. And like, when I used to do, here's where I kind of start this discussion. So, I used to do a lot of divorce work, and I would say to people, like people would say, "I've got rights," or "Their dad is just terrible," or "Their mom doesn't make them practice spelling words," or like, things that seemed inconsequential to me that other people valued quite a bit, right? And like, no surprise, my interest in values and experiences conversation would come in response to that. But in family law, a little bit of background here. In Kentucky and Ohio, I used to practice in Ohio in addition to Kentucky. So, but in Kentucky, where I still am licensed, I'm fairly certain that the standard is still this best interest standard. And in many states, I believe that the interest upon which you make, or the categories that's not the right word, the factors that you consider when determining things like child custody, who makes decisions for children, where children go, parenting time, and then decisions for them also, like if you have to go to the court to decide where a kid's gonna go to school or whether or not they get orthodontia. In most states, I think that the rule is, and this is not legal advice, is I don't know, I talk about legal stuff and idea all the time. I don't know why I've got to give you that caveat in family law. But anyway, um, it's called the best interest standard. And in Kentucky, there's a set of like 11 or 13 factors that the court determines when it looks at this best interest idea. And so when you look at those factors, they get weighed differently depending on the circumstances. So it's factors like what the parents want, what the kid want, what the psychological impact will be, what the community impact will be, things like that. Okay. So we look at all these things. And what I used to say to parents, and here's kind of like where I get to with belong. I'm realizing now that I'm talking about this that when I talk to other people about it, they're probably like, get to the point, lady, because it does take a second. But when you get to the best interest standard, I used to kind of summarize it and say, it doesn't actually matter if kids even are loved. It matters if they feel loved. So long as kids feel safe and loved, whether or not they objectively are, which how could you objectively define love? That's what matters. Like that's kind of what all that goes to is do are they objectively safe? That's absolutely important. And do they feel loved? And so then that carries over. So you know that we had a difficult time advocating for Jack to get to an inclusive setting. It really was a setting discussion, sadly, for kindergarten. And so in that discussion, I kept saying to my husband, Jack will do the work. Our job is to get him to the front door of that classroom, of that building. The second he walks into the school where we know he's going to thrive, he will bring the people to him and the people will want to support him because he is engaged, he is funny, he is cute, he is fun to be around, and he is so, so capable, right? Now, caveat. Do I think you have to be cute and engaged and capable and funny and all of those adjectives in order to deserve or to receive or to achieve or to any verb inclusion? Absolutely. I absolutely do. But you've got to fit sometimes you're fitting a round peg into a square hole, right? And so I knew that to be true of the humans that were involved in our entire circumstance in kindergarten. And, he was so, so loved and it worked out to be far better than just fun. But, that kind of to me was like the beginning of belonging. Then Jack aged and life kind of started to happen. And, we had the pandemic and we had autoimmunity hit us hard and we had like 2 times, and we had other things in our lives happen, and we hit puberty, and we got anxiety, or I'm sure he's already always had anxiety, but anxiety started to look, like, really uncomfortable, and all of these other things. And and Jack's peers also became pubescent, right? And when you're pubescent, you do a great job of thinking about yourself. You go back into this egotistical phase of development. And so all of that to say that in many, many settings, school, community, home, lots of different places, Jack was starting to not feel a sense of belonging. And so I've spent a lot of time thinking like, how do we foster belonging? It's not tangible. It is a sentiment, but it's more than a sentiment, it's a vibe. So, like, when I go someplace new, how do I feel a part of it? How do I actually feel like, hey, I am there? And I want to give you one example. So, and this, like, came from Jack. So when Jack was in middle school, his middle school experience was just, like, dreamy. I mean, like, such a respectful environment, really great access to general education, content, and peers, and vibe, and experience in its full. And, of course, like, things happen, right? Like he is neurodiverse and he's got medical needs and he's got it check the box and he checks all the boxes of potential need, not all of them, but he's a complicated human. So stuff happened, but it was always navigated so incredibly beautifully. Like, he went out a window at school, fortunately on the first floor, but like I wrote an email and said, "Okay, here would be my questions. Thanks so much for telling me he went out a window." And they were like, "Oh my gosh, we're so sorry. We didn't realize like the right hand and the left hand didn't talk, and we told you that he went out a window in an email." Like anything that happened that was not like, super Pollyanna amazing was just handled with such respect and thoroughness and whatever. It was just this really beautiful experience. And so I started to notice like what was happening and what characteristics were making him feel like he was such a piece of the puzzle and such a piece of the community. And one of the biggest ones is nicknames. And so here's what I want to say about nicknames. Like, if you want somebody to feel a part of your group, give them a nickname. It is, like, incredibly helpful, and the nickname doesn't have to be anything, like, weird. Like, I add Areno to a lot of things, like Steve Areno, and then he's like, "Okay," and it doesn't have to even be their nickname. I can just walk up to a guy named Steve and be like, "What's up, Steve Areno?" And it, like, changes the vibe right away. As an aside, it also changes the vibe if you use, like, a kinda kitschy phrase, if that's unique to you. So my best friend Lindsay's really good at this. When Lindsay if she answers the phone, she might do it in French. She might be like, "Bonjour." And it just, like you just feel like a part of, like, an inside joke with her, even though that's not an inside joke. Or she'll say, "Good morning, sunshine," and you're like, "Oh my gosh, like, you think I'm a sunshine?" And it's, like, almost flirtatious, and when somebody is almost flirtatious with you, you feel sometimes, some people might get the ick, but a lot of people, myself included, feel like a part of something, and I'm like, "Oh, yes, we're together in this, like, you think I'm a sunshine," right? So, that's an aside to this nickname. The nickname, when you call somebody a nickname, it familiarizes you with them. It, like, strips down something even as formal as your now some people don't like it, but I really love the nickname thing, and the more I've thought about it so Jack had nicknames in middle school. They called him JB, Jack Barlow. Mm, and he started coming up with nicknames for other people. So he had a nickname for almost all of his aides. He had one kid that called him everything that started with J besides Jack. So he called him like Jeremy and Jackson and John and all of these other names. They also started, again, another aside that's kind of like another thing that you can do, like the greetings, is they started with little like call and response things. So, like, with one of his aides, down the hall, she would say, "Marco," and he would say, "Polo." And I'm like, "That's brilliant," because how many times does Jack walk away from me and I think, "Oh god, is he okay? Does he know I'm behind him?" And, like, if he has on his hearing aids, I can talk directly into him. I can be like, "You come back here right now," or, "Make sure you give that little girl a turn at the slide." But really, if I could just be like, "Marco," he could be like, "I got you, mom." Polo. Yet he has this sense that somebody's got his back. Somebody's watching me. It could be like, "Don't push that girl down the slide," but it also could be, "I see you walking down that big hallway of that middle school by yourself. Look at you shine. Marco." And he's like, "I got you, Polo." It's so cool. It's like this, like, instantaneous bring you back to we're buds. And I think when you bring somebody back to this, like, really basic, really innate level of, like, I see you, I appreciate you, I got you, eureka, belong. So, the nickname thing is, like, so very simple. And it's really exciting. It's exciting enough that I have considered a, like, a really practical guide to fostering belonging. I have started a little bit of research on it. I don't know. Every once in a while I think I'm gonna write a book. And I'm like, I could write a book with special education advocacy strategies with these like belonging things kind of intertwined through it. It's coming. It's like it's coming. It's coming in my brain. I probably need like 85 miles of walks for that to ever come to fruition, but that's like something that's been matriculating in my brain I wanted to tell you about. One last thing about nicknames, and it is this. So I coached as a teenager, starting as a teenager until my early 20s. I coached swimming and diving, and I really like coaching. And my kids have had tens of coaches. My Griffin did every and Jack did too, every single sport you could do as a kid. They have done swimming and diving, of course, tennis, bowling, track, baseball, basketball. If it's available in the middle of the country, my kids have done it in like a private lesson competition or organized team sport thing. And it was soccer. And, so of course we've had coaches that I've loved and coaches that I've been kind of mediocre about and necessarily coaches that I wasn't crazy about, but I had a coach with whom I butted heads. And I used to say about coaches, I guess I still do say, we just haven't had to experience this in a while. To be a good coach, you have to be good at either community or technique. You can be good at both. That's like slam dunk. But community or technique. And when I would talk about community, I would talk about our summer club coaches when I was growing up is on the swim team. So we had a guy that I don't know that I mean, he could swim. I saw him in the pool, but I rarely saw him in the pool. I credit this guy with raising me because I was like a total pool junkie. He was not in the pool very often, but he was an extraordinary swim coach. He did not know swim technique. He coached at a high school, he coached at a summer club, and we did well and we learned how to swim. Now, of course, he learned enough about technique to get us to the next level, but what he was really good at was he was really good at community. And one thing that he did was nicknames. We all had nicknames. Mine appropriately was Splashly. But he would just call me other things, like, every once in a while, he'd call me, like, Roger or Skip well, Skippy was somebody else, but he, called us names that were just something. My dad calls every single person either George or Margaret. All my friends were George or Margaret, usually depending on gender, but sometimes not even depending on gender. He would call me George, like, "Clean your room, George," and I'd be like, "Okay, I'll go clean my room." I literally named a car Margaret because of Curdy and his nicknames. It just makes you feel a part of something, right? What else did summer club coaches do? So my brother was one of my first coaches, and I remember a way that they created community was like sibling kind of banter. So one of the guys would take kickboards and he would almost kind of teasingly harass us, like in a very safe way, not actual harassment. This could never have been viewed as bullying, even in today's generation. But he would tap our feet if we did a turn. He'd tap our feet with a kickboard, or we'd come up to the wall and he'd be spinning a kickboard, like he was like a drum major. He would dive into a lane in the middle of our swim practice. Like, we would be swimming thinking that we were doing something, and when the going got tough, he would, dive in. He would do a cannonball from the high board in between us, and we'd be like, "Oh, what are you doing? That's silly." And it made us it was something that we could all bond together with this, weirdness, unexpected nature of this guy, right? And so that was one way that we had community, one way that we kind of all bonded together. So I don't really have a practical strategy here. I want for this is the kind of podcast where I want for you to know what I'm thinking in a colloquial, mom gut leadershipy way. I would love for this to start a conversation. You guys are really good at emailing me about podcast episodes. So I would love to get your thoughts on email or direct message on Facebook or Instagram of does any of that resonate with you? And then would it be helpful for you to have practical strategies, any ideas that you could take to your IEP team in a non bossy way and be like, here's some ideas for fostering community. I just don't know. I don't know if it would be a good resource or not. Again, I am far from saying I'm gonna do something more with this idea. And my list goes way longer and way deeper and way more in in depth on this topic because now it's got some research behind it. But anyway, those are my thoughts on belonging. Ramblings by Ashley Barlow this Tuesday. That's what you're getting this week. I will see you next week. Same time, same before not so fast. Before I sign off, thank you for your patience. We usually start the school year with a big round of guests. And as you know, I usually do 2 or 3 blitzes where I just invite a bunch of people on the podcast. I was trying to be very deliberate about it this year because I've made some new connections online. I've made some new connections locally. And I was like really trying to say, like, every new person I need to invite them on the podcast, or like, I just need a half day where I do a bunch of invitations. And the beginning of the school year has been crazy for me personally and professionally. So I have done a couple of those blitzes and we're going to get some guests on here too. They are starting to schedule. I am getting out my discussion questions. So thank you for your patience here, but soon you just won't hear me as a talking head. Um, So there you have it. All right, friends. That's it. I'll see you next week, same time, same place.